A couple of weeks ago, we talked about some space-saving vegetable varieties. Well, those same varieties are excellent choices to use in container gardening. And we realize a lot of our viewers with Oklahoma Gardening really don't have the space to go and garden, and a lot of you are even restricted to apartments and those type of living conditions. So today we're going to talk to you a little bit about container gardening. Now the first thing, of course, is just use your imagination on what kind of container you'd like to use. We have some of our space-saving vegetables left, so we're going to do a little bit of vegetable container gardening. This is just one of our black plastic pots that we found that fits into some of our design on our deck. Now if you watched last year, you'll remember that we had some lantana growing in these same decorative pots. And a lot of people thought we had them planted directly into the 2x6s, but really it was deceiving because we had them planted in these same black plastic pots, and then what we do is we cover them up with 2 different depths of the 2x6s, and this is just some scrap board that we had left over. So it really makes a nice decoration and it covers up those ugly pots. And then as time goes on, this variety of tomato won't need staking, so to make a nice centerpiece and a nice decoration for our deck, and hopefully we'll get some fruit off of it as well. Now there's all kinds of decorative things that you can use in a container garden. Here we have a little wheelbarrow that we've constructed. Now a lot of people have a tendency to want to go ahead and put soil directly in them, and that's okay. You just need to remember that you want to treat it with some kind of a weather or water repellent product so it will last a little bit longer. But what we're going to do is just use some containers again that fit in there nicely, and we'll plant some flowers in it. As they grow, they'll fill up, and it's a little bit easier to maintain and clean up, and we can keep the decorative part lasting a little bit longer. Let me show you some other containers that were sent to us by Mr. Howard Moss of Howard Enterprises out of Miami, Oklahoma. This is another Oklahoma product. And his line of containers are called Basket Buddies. And he's got 3 different styles, and we've got 2 of them here. This is called his Super Hanging Basket. And you can tell that it really makes a nice pot for getting a lot of thickness from your plants. Now you could grow vegetables in some of these, lettuce, strawberries even, as well as flowers. He's got another line that stacks on top where you can make them pretty tall, and again it would be something you could set on a patio. This one he calls his UFO, which stands for Unique Flowering Object, and we'll show you how to plant in these in a little bit later on in the segment. But one thing, use your imagination. I've seen people use tires, cement blocks, just about anything for container baskets. But after you've selected your container, the next step is putting your soil in, and that's really a crucial part of this process. A lot of people do not have access to getting soilless mix, so they might use the regular soil from their garden, which we have here. And I'd like to remind you that you really need to sterilize that soil if you're going to use it, because of the fact that it might have a lot of weed seeds or diseases or insects. The best way to do that is to put it in a cooking bag. Make sure you don't get it too thick, and then you'd put it in the oven at a temperature of around 200 degrees, and it needs to stay in there anywhere from 30 minutes to up to 2 hours, but you have to put a thermometer in it, a cooking thermometer, to make sure it gets at least 180 degrees for 30 minutes or more. And that could take up to 2 hours time because of the thickness and the moisture in it. And really, our soil out of our garden sometimes aren't drained that well, and that's why we'd like to encourage you to use a soilless mix if you can. This particular mix is one that we have here in the gardens. It has peat moss in it, as well as vermiculite. And the vermiculite are the white particles that you see that are actually, the vermiculite is the smaller particles that are harder to see that are really a mineral byproduct. The white particles are the perlite, and they're a volcanic byproduct. Both of those are strictly to help in drainage, to allow better drainage in the container. Then of course the peat moss, and a peat moss is a good product, but it has a lot of problems in getting wet. And we've watered this to keep it from blowing, but you can see just a ½ inch down into it, it's really dry. Before you use a mix with peat moss, you really need to break it up. Sometimes it's compressed. make sure it's soaked really well and has a lot of moisture in it. Now the next thing I want to show you is a product called Polymers. They were actually developed because of this problem with containers drying out a lot, especially in a greenhouse situation. Polymers are really a synthetic polyacrylamide, and they've been around for several years now, but they're starting to catch on more and more. People can find them at the garden centers pretty easily, and now they're doing studies in golf courses, lawns, trees, vegetables to see if they really do help hold moisture in that area. And what they look like to start with are really small particles, kind of like sugar. Some are even smaller, and you can see that there. And what they do is they absorb moisture sometimes 100 to 1,000 or even more times their weight. And I've put some in here according to directions, and this was one of those packets mixed with a pint of water, and you can see how it's expanded. And this is supposed to be mixed with your soil, and then the water will remain in there and help hold moisture around the root system. Now the recommendations on this particular brand says to mix 1 part to 6 parts soil. Well, we're going to go ahead and use a complete package, so that is 1 part of the polymer. We've already added 5 parts soil, so we need to get 1 more part of our soil for the appropriate mix. And then the main thing you do is just stir that, mix it all together. Now if you've got a soilless mix that doesn't contain fertilizer, you can mix it in at this point. A recommendation is about a tablespoon to a 12-inch container. And so we'll put in about a tablespoon mixed in. Another guideline is if you're going to make larger quantities, about 1.25 cups to a bushel of mix. We'll have that all mixed up, and again, the polymers are to hold moisture so they won't dry out as quickly in containers, which is a common problem. Now, there's not a lot of research yet to really show the long-term effects of how they work in the soil, and there's been some problems where they're afraid fertilizers might be tied up with the polymers and cause some burning. We're going to try it in some of our containers because they dry out so much. But use caution because, again, we're not really sure what direction they're going to go and all of the pros and cons of the polymers at this point. Well, let's show you now a little fun thing to do with some of your hanging baskets. We're calling this upside down tomato. And what we're going to do, this is a great project for the kids again. We've got some of our transplants left over. This is our yellow pear tomato. So it's going to be real viney, and it's an indeterminate. We've cut a hole in the bottom of our pot, and what you're going to do is just feed that tomato through that hole very carefully without damaging it, which we've done there. And then you can see how we've left the root ball intact. The next thing you want to do is add some of your potting soil, and we've got this mixed up with our fertilizer already. And you want to make sure that you leave a 1/2 inch to 1 inch from the top so it will allow moisture to hold and soak down. If you get it too thick, it's going to run right off the top. Now we've got several that we've already made up. We have one that we've got a larger container where we've saved some space and put some flowers in the top. We've got another one already made up, and they were done last evening, and they're already starting to grow up with the gravity. Our hopes are at the end of the summer that we'll be able to not even see the basket and we'll be able to harvest some fruit. We won't need to stake, and I think it'll be a neat thing and conversation piece for us to show at the gardens. And we'll show you how these are doing later on in the summer. I'd like to show you how you would plant in some of these unique flowering objects as well. A lot of times people get confused on whether or not to plant from the outside in or the inside out, and we want to give you a few pointers. The first thing to do is fill up your soil to the point where the holes are. It's a lot easier then to plant from the inside out, and just if you can find a smaller transplant, it's a lot easier too. But we would have already had our soil in. Then the first thing you do is kind of tilt it at an angle and work your foliage through again without damaging it. And then we can push some of that soil to hold it, and then we can continue to rotate it around until we get them planted, and then add more soil from the top. Then we can plant some in the center as well. Now it's real crucial to keep all of these baskets and containers watered. Even with the polymers, you need to keep up with it. And as they continue to grow, they'll grow upright and cover the basket. And again, it'll be interesting to see how ours do during the summertime. Now I'd like to show you another type of container gardening that's been around for several years.
We hope you enjoyed this video. It's part of our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. You can also find more recent videos on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.